Yes, guys, what is up? Welcome back for yet another episode of the Off Grid podcast. I had a different adventure the other night. I went up on the South Downs and I just did one night of wild camping. It was about 4 o'clock on the Saturday that I set off, and I was back by lunch the next day. And God, it was good. Just complete silence, just spending some time with me to sort of recalibrate and check in with myself. I absolutely loved it. And it was actually this week's guest that kind of gave me the inspiration to go and do that thing. This week I'm joined by Alastair Humphreys. Alastair is an adventurer, author who first became known after cycling around the world for 4 years before going on to pioneer the idea of micro-adventures. In this conversation, we talk about busking across Spain with no money by playing the violin. By the way, he can't play the violin. Why people feel the need to adventure in the first place. How micro-adventures became Alastair's answer to fatherhood and modern day life. How technology is disconnecting us from richer travel experiences. And the chasing of adventurous achievements in pursuit of proving himself. I hope that you guys absolutely love this one. On with the podcast. Alastair, awesome to have you on. Welcome to the Off Grid podcast, mate.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here. I was nearly late, and so I had to run very fast. So I'm now very sweaty.
It's working well. We got the adrenaline pumping,
Yes.
endorphins going. It's a good way to start it. Alastair, you've described adventure before as going towards and running away. What do you mean by that?
Well, if an expedition or big journeys or lots of adventures generally involve you deciding that what you're doing right now in your life, you want to do something different, and therefore you leave the familiar surroundings that you're in now and you venture off into the unknown and hopefully go through perilous journeys, and then you come home transformed, the full hero's journey. And I think pretty much anyone's adventures from me to Star Wars covers that sort of circle. But it can be the motivation for setting off, I think, can either be like, wow, I really want to go and do that great thing because it'll be fun, exciting, challenging, teach me blah, 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 all the usual expedition stuff. Or you're thinking, man, my life here sucks. I just need to throw it all away, burn down my bridges and just head for the open road and just roll the dice and change something. So I think they're the actual adventure themselves and perhaps the outcomes can be the same, but the impetus out the front door is quite polar opposite, I think.
And do you think that for people who are feeling a draw to something or a push away, can it be one thing over the other? Or is it always this kind of symbiotic relationship where the two coexist?
From my own personal experience, it was both. So when I first was daydreaming of my first really big adventure, I was training to be a teacher, and I kind of really liked my life. It was really fine and nice and normal and good and stuff. But I was also kind of thinking, "Ugh, if I just go and get a job as a teacher now, I could well be at that same school for literally 40 years. I don't feel ready for that." So I was feeling this sort of push to burn bridges and bits and just do something. But on the other hand, the positive pull was that I was also reading endless expedition travel books, and I was really excited by the positive pull of the open road. So for me, it was probably a combination of the both. And eventually, somehow, you just need to get to a point where the force is greater than the inertia. You see, I should have been a science teacher, and that then gets you into motion and you get some momentum. Wow, this is science teaching as adventure podcast overlap here.
Can you go through that again? So obviously you're drawn through the extremes, and it seems like from a young age you're kind of looking for some sense of relief or escape. But what I found surprising doing the research for this is that one of your first major expeditions was 4 years going around the world. Seems like just such a massive undertaking. So what led you to going to such an extreme so quickly?
Yeah, yes, yeah, um, that was definitely the biggest adventure that I'd ever done at the time, and also, I suppose, almost by definition, going around the whole world, it's the biggest adventure I would ever do. So my life has been downhill ever since. what pushed me into it was that I thought to myself, I'd love to go on a big bike ride. Maybe I could cycle from England to India. That was my initial thought. And on my wall, I had a map of the world. So I sort of drew this line to India. And then I think, wow, if you've got to India, maybe I could just, it's not that far to Australia then. So let's just keep going a bit. And it grew and grew from that premise, really. But all of that's easy daydream, the sort of waffle and nonsense you talk in the pub. And when I actually set off on the trip, I don't think in my heart of hearts I actually thought I was going to go around the whole world or that I would actually be away for 4 years. What I probably felt deep inside of me was I'm just going to keep going for as long as I can, as long as I want to, till it gets too hard, till I run out of money, till I get tired, and then I'll stop. So what I was really meaning was I'm just going to go and do something big and see how that unfolds. And by good luck, really, because I'd set this ridiculously gigantic hypothetical target of go around the entire planet. Once I set off on the trip and I realized, oh, it's not too bad. I'll do a bit more. I'll do a bit more. I'll do a bit more. I did then end up going around the entire world. Um, Whereas if I'd settled only for saying, let's cycle from England to India, I'd have probably cycled from England to India and thought, wow, that's the furthest I can possibly go. But just by coming up with this slightly dafter hypothetical idea, it pushed me to go further than I'd expected.
What do you think the role of having a return flight or knowing that you're going to be coming back, how do you think that affects an adventure?
Oh, I think commitment to an adventure makes it so much more epic and exciting and rewarding and rich and raw and real and scary. Definitely. It's a huge thing, I think. But I've also slightly always been aware that in my modern day 21st century expeditions, I'm only ever really playing the game. You know, when I was biking around the world, at any desperate time, I could have found some sort of phone and phoned the British Embassy and someone would have got me home. Or even when I was rowing across the Atlantic Ocean, a little boat thousands of miles from land, you can press some little button and eventually some ship will come and pick you up. So I look back with complete awe and at the guys like Magellan when he set off to sail across the Pacific Ocean with literally no idea if he would ever get to the other side or drop off the end or be eaten by a dragon. And no one on the planet knew where they were and no one could help them. That is epic, epic expedition stuff. I'm not sure I would have been brave enough for that.
Yeah, it's almost for me like when I look back to these older adventurers who have gone down in history, just how much more of an adventure it actually was. And, I compare that to what I'm up to now, which is, I'm booking a hostel in advance. I know the bus's timetable because I can Google it. Do you feel like we're kind of losing a bit of what makes an adventure just by technology and the world going the way it is?
Yes, yeah. And at the risk of making myself feel age-wise more in terms of more in common with Magellan or Captain Scott than with you, making me feel very old, is that when I set off around the world, which is 2001 until 2005, I didn't have a phone, I didn't have a laptop, I didn't have iPods didn't even exist. So I crossed Africa with a paper map. So I'd get some address of someone in, let's say, Cairo, and you'd cycle into Cairo. I couldn't speak a word of Arabic. I just have to show this little scrap of paper to people, and they'd sort of point you down roads. And eventually, I'd get to someone's house, knock on the door, and hope they were home. I look back now. I put Google Maps on if I'm driving to the supermarket. The thought of doing that feels terrifying to me. But also, I am so massively grateful for that disconnection from the ease of the digital world. I was having an old man WhatsApp chat just yesterday, actually, with a friend of mine who we cycled through Siberia together, and we carried a stupid number of paper books, and we were desperately trying to save weight. We had no underpants and one pair of socks, but we each had like War and Peace and huge amounts of books. And we were saying that if we were on that adventure now in the tent at night, we'd probably just be scrolling through TikTok videos of cats falling out of trees and stuff, and how grateful we felt for just being epically isolated and completely bored and with nothing better to do than just read War and Peace, which once you've labored your way through 900 pages is of course a brilliantly rich and rewarding thing to do. So I'm so grateful that I did those trips back then. There's that TV show on at the moment called Race Across the World, when they go off and they sort of have to get backpack from place to place. It's all sort of good fun backpacking stuff. But personally, I think the joy of that is that they don't have their phones. So when they need to get a bus to Mexico City or something, they have to go and ask someone. They have to go and ask people and figure out the language and all the messy chaos of it. So yeah, I think that's a. I think the more you can dare yourself to be disconnected on an adventure, the richer it is.
Do you feel like we're losing a sense of worldly human connection in that sense? Because it's pretty easy to now travel around the world without actually speaking to anyone. And if so, like, what are we actually losing in that experience?
Oh, yeah, there's so much to be lost. I mean, there's so much wonderful stuff about phones and apps and digital and blah, and Google translates that you can actually have a nice conversation with someone rather than just waving your hands at people like the good old days. So there's so much good to be had with that. But equally, just the instant connection of it is definitely sort of takes something away from it. So when I set off cycling around the world before the 9/11 attacks, and I was cycling along for a couple of days before I stopped at a shop and I saw a newspaper and think something really crazy just happened. I had no idea of this, so completely separated from that. So I think the more that you can sort of dare yourself to get away from the screen and go talk to people, the better that is. But I mean, we all know all this, don't we? We all know this, and I think we all kind of agree with it. It's just really hard to do because it's quite tempting just to look at your phone for Google Maps and stuff. So it's really easy, and it's almost like that TV show. It's almost quite an artificial construct to not do this stuff now. But it would be interesting, maybe for you to interview some of those people about these questions, and say to them after that experience, how was it? Did it add to their journey to not have their phone, or did it make it worse? That would be a good question to ask them.
I've watched that show as well. I'm a massive fan of it. And I was just thinking to myself how cool it would be to see you on it. Like what that would be like. When you're watching that show, do you ever think to yourself, oh no, I wouldn't do it that way. I'd do it this way? Or how do you think you would approach something like that?
Well, I don't really watch that show because it just makes me jealous that I'm not doing that. So I never really watch it, but I see clips and blah blah blah. I actually think I'd be incredibly boring on that show because they're always sort of struggling for money and stuff. Whereas I over years on my bike, I got used to just eating instant noodles, banana sandwiches, and also whenever they miss a bus and they have to wait till the next morning for the bus, they go to a hotel. Whereas I would just sort of lie down in a drainage pipe free or something. So I wouldn't spend any money at all, and I think I'd be quite boring on the show.
Wow. Okay. And you spoke about war and peace books there. I know that when you were younger, you had an initial interest in the university officer training corps, and you looked into joining the military as well. Do you have an interest in the military?
Um, when I went to university back in those days, the British Army had like the weekend army, the territorial army essentially has this sort of university section, which back then you get paid to do. So that was my job at university, was essentially just to go run around the hills at the weekend and drink really cheap beer. Sometimes you had to do stuff with guns, which I found really boring, and sometimes people shouted at me, which I found really tedious. But essentially, I just got paid to run around the mountains. I absolutely loved it. Some of my best friends for life were from that, and it's quite interesting to compare because a lot of my friends from that went on to do military careers, and some of them are still in the army now and being quite old. They're now pretty senior in the army, and I went off and do a totally different path. And I think I'm glad I didn't join the army, but what I like about it is that it's very quantifiable. Like if you do something well, then this thing happens. If you do something badly, then you don't get that thing, whatever. So it's quite measurable. Whereas when you're on adventures and you're thinking this is the most difficult, epic thing ever, it's not really possible to know, is this actually a really difficult thing that I'm trying to do, or am I just a pathetic wimp? So I did like that measurable aspect of the army, and I also like that it's with other people, so you get the camaraderie of it. Also, I guess the competitiveness of this. So I think I'd have enjoyed that side, whereas the adventurous route's a little bit more lonely and meandering, but you don't have people shouting at you for not cleaning your boots, which appeals to me. And also, you'd have to run around with guns, which I don't have any interest in.
And you really had a bit of flack when you were doing your big adventures, and you said that there were quite a lot of people who would condemn you as a spoiled Peter Pan. Do you ever feel like this need to kind of prove yourself as an adventurer?
Do I feel that need?
Yeah, or did
Um,
you?
yeah, did very much. So one of the going back to your earlier question about the push and pull, what was motivating me to do adventures? Definitely a sizable chunk of it was me having a bit of a chip on my shoulder that I was a bit of a pathetic loser, and I needed to prove myself to myself and also to the world. And it was quite interesting as I cycled off for like a year through Africa. I was notably in my head when things were tough. I'd think of people in my life and think, I can't give up because I got to prove something to this person. For about a year, that was like so that's quite an extrinsic motivation, a motivation outside of myself. And I noticed that after about a year, that those sort of thoughts faded away. And for about the next year or two of cycling, the proving was very much to myself. It was like, right, I've got to keep going to do this thing just so I can prove to myself that I'm worthy of God knows what. So it's a very much an internal thing to myself. And what was quite challenging in the fourth and final year of that adventure was I didn't really care what anyone else thought anymore. I kind of didn't really care what I thought now because I felt I'd done enough. So now I was like, well, what's the point now? I'm just going to cycle across all of stupid Asia. What's the point? And then I thought, oh, maybe I could actually enjoy myself. Maybe this could just be an enjoyable experience. And it doesn't have to be constant misery and self torture the entire time. Maybe I could just have some fun. So, hey, maybe that's called growing up.
Wow, where was that coming from? Obviously, there's this really intense feeling of needing to prove yourself, feeling like you're not enough. Maybe where was the origin of that?
Oh, where's the origin of that? Well, first of all, it was nothing particularly dramatic or drastic. I had a perfectly nice, normal life, so it's not one of these really bad stories of people. I just think felt like I was quite insecure, and probably like a lot of young people, I didn't think I was particularly good at X, Y, and Z, and and I kind of thought the whole world cared about that, but I suspect actually the world didn't care because they were all worried about their own things. And probably most of those people were also thinking, oh, I'm not very good at X, Y, and Z. So I definitely just had a bit of a chip on my shoulder and wanted to prove something to the world. But yeah, I don't think there's any deep psychoanalysis in that really.
Okay, so you're not sure where it came from. The
um, I suspect. Well, I think from when I was at school, I was never like, in the sports teams. I was never the cleverest kid, and the sort of school that I went to is very much based upon the best people are the people in the teams, or the popular kids are the people of this, or the ones who get the awards are the ones who get the best marks. So it's very much a sort of that sort of grading of life type of schooling. So I suspect it probably comes from that. Really thinking, oh man, I wish I could win a prize at sports day. That'd be great. I know. I'll go cycle around the world for 4 years. That will show them.
Yeah, school can be savage like that. And I think a lot of the rhetoric you hear these days is, self affirmations. Tell yourself that you are enough and that you don't need to prove yourself because you're whole as you are. But you were able to use your insecurities to go and do these incredible things in the world. So, what would you say to someone who feels this need to prove themselves and they don't feel enough and they want to go and show the world how amazing they are?
Oof. Well, first of all, I'd say that the vast majority of people probably are perfectly good enough as they are, and that we beat ourselves up so much, and that if you can find someone who really loves you and asks what you're like, they'll probably say you're completely fine. You're fine. We all love you. Get on with your life. You're fine. Don't worry about it. So that would be the serious answer. The next level of answer, I guess, would be for anyone who does feel the yearning to go do a big adventure, would be to read The Worst Journey in the World. It's one of my favorite expedition books about Captain Scott's disastrous Antarctic expedition. And the final line of that book talks about, gosh, I'm going to butcher it here, but essentially saying that if you march your winter journeys, whatever your own personal winter journeys may be, you will have your reward. So long as all you want is a penguin's egg. So in the end, these guys went off and they basically had to find some penguins' eggs. So what he's saying is go and march your winter journeys as long as the reward you want is just something inside yourself. So don't go and doing it because you're wanting to prove yourself to the world or for your medals. Just do it because it feels important to you. And I think if these adventures don't feel important within yourself to you, then you're definitely on a fool's errand, because you're a long time out in hard places, having a hard time, perhaps doing dangerous and difficult things. And if you're not doing it because that feels important and meaningful for you, then you're definitely doing it for the wrong reasons.
I sometimes think that about myself. Like I can see in some of the things I'm doing, I'm trying to prove something to someone that I'm like, I can do it and that I am good enough or whatever. But then self affirmations in the mirror just don't cut it. Like as long if you keep telling yourself that you are enough, it's like it's hard to believe that. So I sometimes feel like actually go do the thing, go prove them wrong, go prove yourself right, and then you can get over it almost.
Yeah, I don't think you can just do the affirmations in the mirror and say them and they do become true. These aren't fairies' magical wishes. So you have to actually learn that you are enough, so to speak. And well, we can go back again to the Captain Scott's expedition to the South Pole, and the team of 5 men who went to the pole with Captain Scott. They on the sledges that they pulled, they had little flags, sledging banners, little flags uh, sticking up. And one of the guys of the 5 was called Birdie Bowers. He's a funny little fellow, but he's a very small guy, but incredibly tough. And his pennant said, this is classic olden day explorers, they're all in Latin. And his said, Esse quam videri, esse quam videri, which means to be rather than to appear. As in, you need to just be the person doing the thing, not someone just appearing to be doing it or showing off about it or whatever. So you've just got to be rather than to appear. I think is a good sledging motto and probably a good thing to put on a post-it note by your mirror as well.
Is that something that you live by today?
Oof, gosh. Well, you know, years, and I've definitely at times had some slogans like that pinned up all around the place, and I found the fact that remembered that instantly when you asked me about it shows that it was played a big part in my life. But hopefully, now that I'm an old man, I feel these days I've kind of got to the point where I sort of accept who I am, for better for worse, and I don't really give a damn anymore, which is kind of a lovely place to be. I'm approaching that lovely poem of that old lady. What's her name? Jenny Joseph. When I'm old, I shall wear purple. And just do crazy stuff and eat a pound of sausages every day. And she no longer cares. So yeah, but I think we all want to be somewhere between Apsley Cherry Garrard chasing penguins' eggs, Birdie Bowers heroically marching to his death to be rather than to appear, and Jenny Joseph, when I'm old, I shall wear purple. Um,
And
yeah.
I know that you've spoken before years ago about how when you spoke about past experiences that you felt like a fraud sometimes. Why is it that you felt that way?
Um, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what context you have that from, but I certainly used to feel talking about past experiences when I didn't really feel that I had fantastic future experiences in the pipeline. I started to really get sick of that. To just think, oh, am I constantly just living in the past? I'm turning into Bruce Springsteen's glory days. I hope when I get old, I don't sit around talking about it, but I probably will. Sitting back, trying to recapture a little bit of the glory. And yeah, well, hey, here we are today talking about me cycling around the world in the year 2001. How ridiculous is that? I passed just a couple of months ago. I passed the point where it's more than half of my life ago that I finished that I did that trip. So, and I'm still here. I am talking about it today. I've kind of got to come to peace with it now. That it's kind of the most interesting thing I did, and people interested in it. So I talk about it. But for quite a long time, when I stopped doing the really big expeditions, it really living off the stories of these exciting adventures, when to my mind my future didn't seem particularly adventurous and exciting.
Did you ever feel like there was that wrestle throughout your career? Because I'm just thinking about when you are an adventurer, you're going and doing an adventure, you're coming back and then talking about it. So it is inherently about the past and what you're talking about. Did you feel like like throughout your career, you've kind of wrestled with that relationship?
Well, it's about it's about the past, but it's also about the future. Because one thing you can absolutely guarantee is that any talk you do about the most epic thing in the universe, I guarantee you, someone's question will be, "What's next?" And for years, I used to absolutely hate that question because well, actually, it was all right when I did have an answer of what's next, but when I got to the point where I didn't really have an answer, I just get so furious with it within myself. Like, isn't what I've done enough? What's next? What's next? Ed Stafford, who walked the length of the Amazon, he once said something like, "What's next? Is this not fucking enough for you? I might just go home and have a cup of tea." And then a wonderful book by Edward Collins, who's one of the three guys on the Apollo 11 mission that went to the moon. He, in his fantastic book, Carrying the Fire, he talks about when he's got back from the moon, everyone's like, "Hey, what's it like up there?" And he talks about, if one more cigar puffing so and so says to me, "Hey, what's it like up there?" I'm just going to punch him in the gut because he's so he's so fed up of this. So I think that very much used to bother me, the question of what's next, if when I didn't feel that I had a what's next within me. So, but equally, I spent years training for, chasing money for, chasing funding for an expedition to the South Pole, which in the end I never went to do. But for several years, I'd do a talk about biking around the world, and they'd be like, "What's next?" I'd talk about this South Pole plan and waffle away, and everyone's very happy. I hadn't actually done anything, and in the end, I never actually did it. But everyone seemed quite happy with me talking about that sort of thing. So I think in terms of the speaking stuff, you need the past story, but I mean, you can make up any old future story, and people seem entirely happy with that for as long as your self-respect allows you to keep spouting it.
And I know that a massive part of your life that changed everything was becoming a dad. How did that change your perspective on the world and yourself?
Well, suddenly you're a bit busier. You can't. You've got things to do, literally every single day, and you have to do those things, but also you want to do those things, and then becomes a tug of I'd really like to go and walk across the desert for 6 months. Oh, but yeah, I've also got to do these other things. And then you comes down to a choice of what matters the most to you. And I chose the option of starting doing micro adventures. So chasing small, short, little local, close to home adventures to try and get my outdoor energetic fix that way.
Okay, so for people who have no idea, what is a micro adventure and how can they do it in themselves?
A micro adventure. Well, I think the important thing for anyone listening to this is just to ask themselves, what does an adventure mean to you? Because we each have different definitions and levels and expectations of that. So, what does an adventure mean to me? Boom. And then you think, oh man, I haven't got enough time to do that. I haven't got enough money to do that. Um, I live in a suburb, not a log cabin in Alaska, so I can't go do that epic thing. So then the question is, do you just then do absolutely nothing at all, just sit on the sofa and watch Netflix, or do you try and shrink it down to a smaller version so that the obstacles and the barriers and the constraints are not the problem anymore, and suddenly there is an opportunity to think, hey, I do have enough time and money and skills and whatever to perhaps just go sleep on your local hill after work for the night, and then you wake up in the morning, run back home, sweaty, ready for your first Zoom call meeting of the next day. So it's just about looking for the opportunities to squeeze in adventure around the busy margins of daily life rather than lamenting the stuff getting in the way.
What's an adventure to you?
Well, that has changed and evolved a lot over lots of years. So when I first started doing adventures, the biking around the world type era, adventures very much were about the epic, the extreme, the very far away, the very difficult, the big stuff. And then over time, they've evolved to be much more about doing stuff that makes me curious and gets me enthusiastic, and I'm uncertain how it will unfold. And if it's about newness and curiosity and enthusiasm, then I think that really broadens what adventure can become, because it can be much more multidisciplinary. It doesn't just have to be a flogging yourself to death on some sort of stupid desert crossing or ocean or something. It can be much more interesting and varied than that. And also, importantly, I think it can be much more inclusive for much far more people, and also much more local and achievable for more people more often.
You were super open in a article I read about how fatherhood affected your idea of adventure and identity, and you spoke about feeling a bit like a prisoner, and that there were times where you sort of turned mean as well, and it sort of changed your inner character. What was it about fatherhood that forced you to confront yourself about being a man?
Gosh, I think there's got a pivot in that question there. I think there's frustrations of um, being a parent in that you're really busy doing stuff which you're doing out of a loving duty, but at times it's also really boring. If you ask any parent of young children, they're exhausted and they're also kind of quite bored sometimes. And the adventure stuff that I talk about as being sort of difficult and stuff, it's kind of fun, really. You're just sort of wandering around the desert having a lovely time, or riding your bicycle somewhere cool. So it's definitely a sort of lovely, fun, easy kind of option. Um, and but I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure about this of being a man side of stuff. I think what has changed for me in that over the years is a mixture probably of society's perceptions of what being a man's about, and also myself growing up and getting older and more mature myself. So in the early days, I was very, very much driven by sort of macho uh, inspiration of explorers, people like Ranulph Fiennes and these real crazy tough guys. And my adventures were very much about I will not quit under any circumstance. I will not show any weakness. I must keep going. I must keep going. And a lot of that was tied up, I suppose, with my identity as a man. And society's evolving on that and becoming big, starting to think that, well, there's kind of a place for that, but also maybe it's a bit silly sometimes, and maybe it's all right to be a bit tired and maybe a bit sad and maybe have a little cry and a cup of tea, and that's fine too. And also, I guess as I've got older, I've realized that there's a lot more interesting stuff in life than being really tough, and it's kind of fun to just have interesting conversations with people and to give and take and to laugh a bit and to be a bit silly and to just be softer and more vulnerable. And weirdly, that actually becomes a bit more of a strong superpower, because if you're not hiding behind some shield of I'm a really tough guy, I'm look how tough I am, look how tough I am, look how tough I am, then and you're just like, well, actually I'm not actually that tough all the time, then no one can hurt you anymore. Once you've admitted your weaknesses to the world, they're not actually your weaknesses, they become your superpowers. And a weird sort of little example of that was I spent a month walking through Spain with no money, playing a violin to earn money, and my violin playing completely and utterly sucks, absolutely terrible. And also, I find performing in public, singing, dancing, music, so embarrassing, about the most scary, worst thing I can do. So I felt there's like so many anxieties and weaknesses and vulnerabilities to all of this. But when I just forced myself to just think, well, I'm really hungry, I've got no money, so I'd better just try and earn €1 to buy a loaf of bread, and you start playing the violin really badly, but just laughing about it and smiling with eye contact with people. People responded to that. They were like, gosh, this, but look at him. He's trying his best. He's clearly a nice enough guy, and people would help me and give me coins and fund my journey. It was a wonderful experience. And I felt in many ways that that was the most adventurous journey I've been on. And the adventure there was nothing to do with walking hundreds of miles, because I've done that lots of times and it's really not rocket science. The adventure there was the curiosity and the newness and the surprise and the vulnerability of the violin playing. So there's an expansion to your definition of adventure question.
And what seems interesting is that it feels like you were confronting something different in yourself when you were playing the violin in Spain compared to when you're way out in the middle of nowhere trying to find your way. Obviously, I think going into that, a lot of people would maybe think that given that you had done loads of adventures before, that something like that would be just like a doddle in the park. But what was it that you were noticing in your own feelings and emotions and maybe a bit of embarrassment that was different to the other adventures?
They were completely different things, because I mean, so on that adventure, I also walked 500 miles and I wild camped every night and slept in the mountains and I cooked my food on fires and I drank out of rivers and stuff. So that's some classic kind of adventure stuff. And I guess if I'd never done any of that before, then that would have been a real adventure in itself. And there's loads of people for whom that would be a great adventure. I mean, well, for example, if we go to the Royal Albert Hall and go and get 10 expert violin dudes from there and make them walk hundreds of miles, for them, they'd probably find that really hard. And that would be the adventure for them. But for me, I've done that before. So that was me in my comfort zone. That was my routine. That was my familiarity. And whereas the violin part was very new and I found very frightening and vulnerable and therefore quite adventurous. So when you asked me earlier about the definition of adventure, I think it's different for everyone. Everyone has a different thing that makes them feel scared and is daunting to begin. And that's why it's a much more interesting genre when it's not just adventure means middle class white man climbs to the top of a mountain before anyone else and puts a flag on the top. I mean, I used to love that kind of stuff, and it's kind of cool, but it's much more interesting when it's much broader than that.
Yeah, for sure. And the way that you're able to put it, you've done so many wacky and wonderful adventures, and clearly your spirit is just so alive. Like even in this conversation, it's like I can feel it. It's like tangible, your energy for life and adventure. But for people who aren't like that at all, and they're just wondering why on earth you would choose to do that with your spare time. Why would you drink out of a river when you've got a tap at home and all this sorts of stuff? How would you say to that person why you do what you do?
Well, maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I'd say to them, well, that's fantastic that you have no desire to do this. You've got a lot more common sense than me. Maybe you're just nice and happy as a person. Wouldn't it be great to not feel the urge to go do stuff and that you could just sit on a chair in the garden and watch the flowers? That'd be lovely. So needs to be me asking them the question of, hey, how do you just not feel the desire to chase the horizon? How do you not feel the desire to punish yourself in this name of some sort of ridiculous future betterment? Why do you not feel the urge to have a really miserable time today just so that tomorrow will feel nice when you get back to a comfy bed and a shower? That's ridiculous. A friend of mine described adventuring as banging your head against a brick wall purely because it then feels really nice when you stop. So it's kind of stupid, really.
Oh, wow. What traits do you have that you're ashamed of but slightly proud of?
Ashamed of but slightly proud of. Hmm, gosh, are we talking hygiene here?
Anything to do with your character?
Gosh, ashamed of. I'm not sure I'm that ashamed of much, really. I guess what? Yeah, I don't think I am ashamed much. What am I proud of? I quite like just trying to see the positive side of stuff and not take life too seriously. But yeah, I don't think I'm ashamed of much, really.
Okay, because what I was wondering is if there's anything where it feels like within you there's this voice which is like you need to go and achieve and
Mm.
do stuff, and it kind of sounds like a bit of a bully in your own head, and then you've got to go and do it in order to quieten the voice down. But I was wondering if any part of you kind of enjoys that.
Well, I guess in a lot of ways it makes things interesting. I have spent probably my ambition over the last 15 years or so has been to be less ambitious. And I have found it interesting that the less I've chased personal ambition and personal glory, whatever all that means, the more content and approaching happy I seem to have become. So yeah, so I'd be quite happy to put that beast to bed and just chill out. And I think maybe it's because I'm getting old. I just don't really care about achieving much anymore. Maybe it's because I don't really achieve much anymore, and I'm content with that. Who knows? But yeah, I definitely don't have that raging sort of ambition I used to. I tell you something I did. I tried to run a 5K the other day, and 5K is a really quite a tiring event because you sort of feel you should sprint the whole way, but then you get knackered. I got to 4 kilometers, and to my absolute astonishment, when I was really tired, I quit. I just stopped. So, this really hurts. I know, I'll stop. That feels better. And about a minute later, I was like, what are you doing? This is the one thing that you're good at in the universe is not stopping when it's pain. I couldn't believe, I know after about a minute when I got my breath back, I was really cross at myself. But yeah, that marks a new phase in my life that I just thought, I'm kind of tired. So I'm going to stop. So I don't know what that says about myself, but I was very surprised at myself.
How have you noticed as you've aged your identity change as life changes?
Well, what I've really tried to do is to not make my identity be about my so-called achievements, like my adventures and stuff. And I know that sounds preposterous now that we're on an hour-long conversation with me talking about me, about how amazing I am. But really, my life really separates into two bits. There's like Alastair Humphreys, the internet guy, which is man showing off about himself and trying to sell everyone his books of self-promotion stuff. But that's kind of my just a job, really. And then the actual real life me. So when I'm just out and about in a town or with normal friends, stuff like that, I never talk about adventuring or anything like that, or books or anything. I just try and just get on with normal kind of life. So I think that's a very big, huge separation in my life.
And
So, for example, no offense, if I won £1 million in the lottery tomorrow, I would not be doing this podcast. So, I'm enjoying the conversation. Once I actually start having them, I quite enjoy them. But in my normal life, I wouldn't choose to have this sort of conversation anymore.
okay, so the purpose for doing conversations like these is promotion and to pursue your career as an author.
Well, I guess it depends on what I guess it depends on what the podcast is. So at the most mercenary level, the reason I agreed to come on your podcast is because I've got a new book out in a month or two. It's like, cool, let's do podcasts. Quite a lot of the year, I just say no to podcasts. But when it's time to a book out, then I sort of go back on the podcast bandwagon. So yes, at the most simple level, I'm here because hopefully someone will buy a book and then ka-ching, and I'll pay for my next cup of coffee. But on the sort of the less crass, the next level from that is what I've really enjoyed in sort of communicating about adventures is when people go off and do stuff of their own. And I guess some people go off and do big adventures, but far more people go off and do micro adventures. So people hear stories of adventures, they think, oh, that sounds interesting. And then maybe they go do something with their friends or their family or their kids this weekend. And that is where adventure to me feels like a really worthwhile calling, a sort of mission to try and encourage lots of people to do that. And I started doing that sort of communication about adventure because the adventures that I went on were so good for me. I could just feel my self-confidence grow from doing adventures, and they added so much richness to my life, and they taught me about the world and about myself, and they're just fantastic. And so from that, I got a bit messianical about thinking I want more people to do this sort of stuff. And I think that's what led me to writing a micro adventures book and doing lots of hundreds of blog posts about what sleeping bags to take on adventures, is because it really feels nice to me when other people go off and do adventures. In more recent years, I feel I've even moved away from micro adventures to be much more passionate about nature and the environment issues these days. And that's generally what I bang on about to anyone who'll listen. And that feels to me really important as a bigger cause. So that's the sort of overall grander reason why I keep communicating about adventures through podcasts, social media, books, stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think it's good to it's so like refreshing to be open about it because it's like we everyone needs to make a living and this is like what adventurers do. So let's get to the book, Unwilded. You know, what's the blurb? What's it all about?
Well, now I feel really crass talking about this because this is because so I'll do the crass bit, then we'll just have a nice conversation about the topic. So the crass thing is that I've written a book called Unwilded, which is coming out soon, and everyone should buy it. But so that's that part. The more interesting part, I think, is that what as my adventuring's got smaller and smaller and smaller, I've started to notice the world more and more. So I wrote a book called Local a couple of years ago, which is about spending a whole year exploring the single ordnance survey map that I live on. area about 20 kilometers by 20 kilometers. And all of us, wherever we live, we all live on one of these maps. You can go and buy from the bookshop and see your house on there. And then I spent a year just exploring that. And what I found in that year was that I noticed nearby nature and everyday wildness more than I'd ever done before. And I don't live anywhere particularly thrilling. It's just a sort of bog standard suburban bit of southern England. Yet suddenly I was now connecting to nature and loving the wild planet in a way that I don't really think I ever did on my big expeditions. Yeah, when I've cycled over mountain ranges, of course, it's wonderful and fantastic. I'm like, wow, this is great to be here. But looking back, I sort of think that I treated the world as a bit of like a backdrop in a theatre to me having my adventures. Whereas when I was just doing the local map, everything was so small and so unremarkable. There's no sort of great big giant mountain to look at and go, wow. So instead I sort of get down on my knees and I look at a daisy in the park, and then you start to think, wow, that's pretty incredible in its own way. So this local exploration has got me caring about nature more than anything ever did before. Which leads me then to, I worry that society, all of us, are quite disconnected from nature. We spend time on our screens rather than being out in nature. And I think most people kind of accept that. So my book here is about how to rewild ourselves. I feel we've got unwilded. And my argument in this book, smaller than ever, is that spending 15 minutes in nature every day is a good stepping stone towards rewilding ourselves. So my adventures have gone from me showing off about cycling around the entire planet to now writing entire chapters about me sitting on a log near a petrol station for 15 minutes. So make of that what you will about my adventuring, the demise of my adventuring career.
No, no demise at all. Just different times. I think we can all take something from it as well. Like being able to spend 15 minutes. Everyone has 15 minutes in their day, which is great. And you've also described that 15 minutes in nature as something to save the universe. I was wondering what you'd be saving the universe from.
I would be saving the universe from the fact that at the moment the planet is sleepwalking towards absolute disaster. You know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of species are going extinct. Shark species that have been around for 400 million years are going to go extinct during your lifetime and mine. And that, I feel, well, morally, that just feels appalling to me. But even if you don't really care about sharks, then think about as the temperatures rise, climate's changing, we're going to get mass migration. There'll be so many immigrants coming to our country. So whichever angle of life floats your boat, these issues really, really matter to us. And yet we're just sleepwalking through, just sleepwalking really, because we're so busy. We're indoors, we're on our screens, we're just getting on with life. You and me probably, well, actually almost by definition, every single person listening to this is in the rich percentage of the planet. We're kind of fine. We're still going to get some food, we're bed, we're going to get some water, we're fine. We're sleepwalking away into all these problems. And what I feel is that by spending 15 minutes in nature, you start to then act from a point of love and positivity. You start to think, wow, this little thing near where I live is fantastic. And it makes me feel better and happier and healthier. And I want I want to do something to protect it. And if you start to protect the local things around you, then that's going to step up towards the big things. But I don't think the big systemic changes that we need are going to come unless people really, really care and love their nature near where they live.
Yeah, yeah. Feeling more connected to have that empathy with the world and realizing that Mother Nature is there.
Yeah, but I think also it can be. I'm a very lazy and very selfish person, and what I found since I became an epic tree hugger is that it's kind of made my own life better. You know, you can talk about big climate type things to do with, say, our choices on transport or our choices on diet, and you can go on and on about the problems that these things cause. But what really motivated me to start taking action on those was when I saw that the changes actually make my life better. So eating healthier food, traveling in different ways that make me open my eyes. So it's actually making my life better. So I think if we can approach it all from, hey, This is a way to make life more fun, more rewarding, more healthy, more interesting, cheaper, really good stuff, rather than just going, if you don't stop taking plastic bags to the supermarket, we're all going to die. Or if you've got this disposable coffee cups, we're all doomed. And this sort of negative moaning, doom and gloom stuff we hear all the time. Eventually, like, oh man, I check out. I don't care anymore. So what I'm trying to say through this is just positive stuff like, hey, this is fun. This is healthy. This is good stuff. Go look at some daisies and be impressed.
Alistair, I know you don't like being asked what's next. So is there a question that I haven't asked you during our conversation that you would love to answer?
Oh, that's a very good question. Um, hmm. No, I think you've asked me a good range of different and difficult questions. I mean, what next? For many years, I always kind of had an answer to what was next, like some sort of big adventure or then small adventure, micro adventures. But I now actually have absolutely no idea what's next. I've just started reading a book which is about what's it called? Thinking inside the box. It's about constraints. Um, and the thesis of this book is that if you have the freedom to do anything you want in life, then that's you kind of don't really know what to do and you end up doing nothing. And it argues that putting constraints onto things helps you come up with creative, novel ways of coming up with ideas. So actually, I'm going to try and put some constraints onto the nature micro adventure overlaps of my life and see what I can come up with for my next mission.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for sharing all of your wonderful wisdom and also just the diversity of what an adventure can be. I feel like that's the most applicable thing for so many people listening is anyone can go and do it. It doesn't have to be this massive thing, but to hear that from someone like you, I think means a lot more. So thanks a lot for coming on.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much for having me, Jake. I've enjoyed it.
Cheers.